believing themselves to be carriers of the blood of a superior Aryan race. With some of the highest intellects in the world, they would unleash the most brutal war in human history. At that time, few could imagine that just over 20 years earlier, Germany was nothing but a pile of rubble, buried under a mountain of debt, seemingly unable to escape the darkness of the post-war era. So, from where did they derive the strength to bring all of Europe to its knees? Welcome to Military Summary and our World History segment. Light at the end of the tunnel. The First World War ended with a result that could not have been worse for Germany. The Treaty of Versailles assigned all responsibility to Germany with terms that could not have been harsher. Germany was forced to pay reparations of 132 billion gold marks, equivalent to 269 billion US dollars at the time, a colossal sum. It wasn't until the year 2010 that Germany finally paid off this debt. Furthermore, they had to completely relinquish all their colonies around the world and reduce their military to a level permitted by Britain and France. At this very moment, the government added fuel to the fire. They printed vast amounts of money to pay the debt, leading to a state of hyperinflation that caused consumer prices to skyrocket. The economy fell into chaos, and food riots broke out. At its peak, one US dollar could be exchanged for 42 trillion marks. By January 1923, when the government failed to make a reparation payment, French and Belgian troops occupied all of Germany's industrial areas in the Ruhr region, which was followed by widespread civil unrest. Having already lost its colonies, Germany now lost its industrial heartland. The German economy at that point was considered completely collapsed. It was at this time that the National Socialist German Workers' Party, known as the Nazi Party, was formed. The party's platform included abolishing the Weimar Republic, rejecting the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, radical anti-Semitism, and opposing Bolshevism. They promised a strong central government, increased living space, Lebensraum, for the German people, the establishment of a national community based on race and ethnic purification through the persecution of Jewish people, who would be stripped of their citizenship and civil rights. The Nazis proposed national and cultural reforms based on the Völkisch movement. In the early days, as the people lost faith in the government, the Nazi Party seized the opportunity, organizing propaganda sessions to win over the populace. The U.S. stock market crash on October 24, 1929, had a devastating impact on Germany. Millions suddenly found themselves unemployed, and numerous major banks were forced to close. Hitler and the Nazi Party were ready to exploit this crisis to gain support. They promised to strengthen the economy and create jobs for the people. Many voters chose the Nazi Party, believing they could restore order, quell civil unrest, and enhance Germany's prestige on the international stage. In 1923, the new chancellor, Gustav Stresemann, took office. He borrowed money from the United States and reopened some industrial plants, leading to a slight economic recovery. However, just 6 years later, the economic crisis of 1929 once again wiped everything away. The United States called in its debts from all its debtors, especially Germany. And so, before it could even catch its breath, Germany's economy plunged into crisis once more, and the German people's patience had run out. The opportunity fell into the hands of Hitler and the Nazi Party. With his experience from his days as a homeless man and his outstanding oratorical skills, Hitler struck a chord with millions of Germans and voters. Everything seemed like a perfect play to bring him to power. In the eyes of the German people at that time, Hitler was like a messiah sent to save the descendants of the Aryan race, and his subsequent actions only further confirmed their faith in him. An illusionary economy or the power of iron discipline? When thinking of the Nazi economy, we often imagine an illusionary economy, where Hitler confiscated Jewish property and removed women from the workforce to create impressive statistics to propagandize the people. But that is only the beginning of the story. As the saying goes, first things first. The first thing Hitler needed to do upon taking power was to solve the economic problems, or rather, to clean up the preceding mess. At that time, there were over 6 million unemployed people in Germany. The nation's wealth was no longer in the hands of the German people, but was largely controlled by Jewish citizens. Hundreds of problems were bearing down on the Nazi Party. And in that chaotic moment, Hitler realized he had a powerful tool at his disposal: the army and paramilitary forces. Along with that, imposing iron discipline on every aspect of life was the solution. In May 1933, the president of the Reichsbank and Minister of Economics, Dr. Hjalmar Schacht, created a deficit financing plan. Capital projects were paid for with the issuance of promissory notes called MIFO bills. Essentially, the government was printing money for payment. While the national debt soared, Hitler and his economic team expected that future territorial expansion would provide the resources to pay off the debt. Under Schacht's management, unemployment fell rapidly, faster than in any other country during the Great Depression. However, with the military not yet fully fledged and the time for war not yet ripe, how could they get the assets and money to pay the workers? It was simple: confiscate the property of the Jewish people. With the most fearsome propaganda machine ever created, German society at that time viewed Jews as demons to be eliminated from society, and their property was to be confiscated or nationalized. With money for salaries secured, the next issue was creating real jobs for the German people. This problem was also easy to solve. Open a factory or a labor camp, push them in, pay them a living wage, and combine it with propaganda. Done. However, this does not mean it was all a sham. Hitler truly did lift German society out of poverty by bringing them into military environments. German soldiers were paid a decent salary and held a higher status in society. This created a German society that glorified the military, war, and violence. Because the Nazi Party's policy was to use war, factories manufacturing weapons, from guns and ammunition to planes and tanks, sprang up like mushrooms, thus solving the employment problem. First, the Junkers aircraft factory was nationalized and placed under the control of Aviation Minister Hermann Göring. Aircraft production immediately soared. From a workforce of 3,200 people producing only 100 planes per year in 1932, less than 10 years later, the industry had grown to about 250,000 workers, producing over 10,000 technically advanced aircraft per year. And so, one by one, the factories fell into the hands of the Nazi government. Coupled with the imposition of iron discipline everywhere, labor productivity was always at its highest, creating a huge volume of goods to meet the people's needs. However, this does not mean that the Nazis only stole from others to redistribute to their own people. The German economy had, in fact, begun to show signs of recovery and started to compete again, pushing out rivals who had taken over their market share. Admittedly, the Nazi Party was also a collection of masters of psychological manipulation. In 1932, when oil prices were plummeting because people could no longer afford to buy anything and everything was in surplus, Hitler's government persuaded petrochemical companies to share their profits. The government would guarantee these companies a 5% return on their investment in synthetic oil plants, with the rest to be submitted to the state. If you were a business owner in 1932, not going bankrupt was already a blessing, let alone making a profit. They quickly shook hands without a second thought. But only a few years later, they realized they were just a small part of a larger machine. As the economy recovered, profits from oil sales became enormous, but now they had to turn over most of it to the state. With money in hand, the fascist government continued to invest in public works. Large public works projects were financed through foreign loan policies, including the Autobahn highway network. In addition, the state provided funding for programs initiated by the old government, such as agricultural and housing reforms. And where there's work, there must be workers. The unemployment rate continuously decreased. To stimulate the construction industry, Credit was provided to private companies, and subsidies were made available for home purchases and repairs. Young Aryan couples planning to marry could receive a loan of up to 1,000 Reichsmarks, on the condition that the wife would leave the workforce. The amount to be repaid would be reduced by 25% for each child they had. Everything was very attractive. When the Nazis took power in 1933, Germany had 6 million unemployed people. By 1937, this number had dropped to under 1 million. But as mentioned, iron discipline was imposed everywhere. The real wage in 1938 had fallen by 25% compared to 1933. The average work week for Germans increased from 43 hours in 1933 to 47 hours in 1939. Furthermore, with the establishment of concentration camps, all Jews who had not managed to escape Germany were forced into hard labor until exhaustion without pay. The war economy was primarily based on large-scale slave labor. The Nazi Party imported and forced about 12 million people from 20 European countries to work as slaves in factories and on construction sites. Approximately 75% of them were from Eastern Europe. Many of them were victims of Allied bombing raids, as they received very little protection. Poor living conditions led to high rates of illness, injury, and mortality, along with rising crime. In early 1934, the Nazi Party shifted its focus from supporting job creation plans to rearmament activities. By 1935, military spending accounted for 73% of the government's expenditure on goods and services. On October 18, 1936, Hitler appointed Göring as plenipotentiary of the four-year plan, with the intention of accelerating the rearmament program. Besides calling for the acceleration of construction of steel plants, synthetic rubber factories, and other types of factories, Göring also established price and wage controls and limited the issuance of dividends. Large expenditures were invested in rearmament activities despite the growing deficit. With the introduction of the compulsory military service law in 1935, the German army, which had been limited to 100,000 men by the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, had 750,000 active duty troops and 1 million reserves at the start of the Second World War. By January 1939, the number of unemployed had dropped to 301,800, and by September, this number was only 77,500. Once the economy was stable, it was time to heal the eagle's wings so it could soar once more. From the very beginning, Hitler linked economic reconstruction and the military together to bring Nazi Germany to dominate Europe. After the end of World War I, the German army was like a man in shackles, with its numbers and equipment severely restricted. Hitler and the Nazi Party had to find a way to circumvent the law and restore their military. Just as his inner circle was racking their brains, thousands of kilometers to the east, a light appeared at the end of the tunnel. During the 1930s, the Soviet Union gradually rose to become the beacon of the Red Empire. This vast country transformed itself from a backward agricultural nation to a developed industrial power in just 18 years. This strength sent a chill down the spines of French, British, and American leaders. Hitler capitalized on this well by arguing that Germany must be used as a buffer to stop the communist wave from the East, misleading the Western powers. In this situation, the United States, Britain, and France turned a blind eye, allowing Germany to rearm its military and develop its weapons. If someone were to ask what made the German army so strong, it wasn't the U-boats or the Tiger tanks or any single weapon. It was discipline. The Wehrmacht was considered the most disciplined military force on the planet at that time. Thanks to the Nazi propaganda machine, they created the most loyal and fanatical army in history. The doctrines of a superior race, eugenics, and ethnic cleansing were what was instilled in the minds of the German people, especially the military. They believed their Aryan race was the noblest, with the right to rule other peoples, and they clearly identified two main enemies: the Slavic race, i.e., the Russians, and the Jewish people, who were later seen as the enemies preventing them from world domination. This created an army that embodied all the elements of loyalty, courage, aggressiveness, and iron discipline. Historians later wrote that Hitler's emotional speeches captured the hearts and minds of many Germans. He had almost mesmerized his audience. Perhaps Hitler was wrong to believe his race had the right to rule the world. But he was right about one thing. The Aryan race was home to many geniuses. Nazi Germany's scientists were pioneers in the field of weaponry for a long time. If not for Hitler's stubbornness in certain areas, the outcome of this war might not have been what it is today. Instead of recounting German inventions, we just need to look at the actions of the Allied powers after their victory to see how skilled the Germans were. After World War II ended on the European front, before even dividing German territory, the Soviet Union and the United States were already competing to gather as many German scientists and research documents as possible. At least 2,000 German scientists and millions of research documents were brought back to the United States and the Soviet Union, leading to revolutionary breakthroughs later on. Werner von Braun, with his research on liquid fuel rockets, is considered the father of the world's ballistic missile industry. Along with his colleagues, he successfully developed the V-2 rocket. Although this weapon was not overly successful, it later laid a massive foundation for humanity's space age. Other examples include the first jet aircraft, the Heinkel He-178, and various types of smart bombs. Thus, it can be seen that Nazi Germany once had a period where its technology outclassed both the United States and the Soviet Union in many fields. However, as mentioned, Hitler made erroneous decisions in weapons development that wasted scientists' time and money. Examples include his bigger is better philosophy, which created two of the biggest failures in history, the Panzer V8 Maus and the Schwerer Gustav supercannon. Or when battlefield reports came back about the effectiveness of the Katyusha rocket launcher, German scientists proposed that Hitler copy this weapon, but he refused out of arrogance. These are the reasons why the German army was so formidable in World War II. While the rest of the world was still mired in crisis, Hitler truly made Nazi Germany rise to become a monster that outclassed the world. If you know anything more, please share your opinions.